Reading A Planned Deception by Constance Cumbey. This is Chapter 16. Networking the Global Vision. Quote, "The open conspiracy must begin as a movement of explanation and propaganda," unquote. H.G. Wells, The Open Conspiracy, page 126. Quote, "It must be remembered that the forerunner of all movements which appear upon the physical plane is an educational propaganda. Disciples in these ashrams have been in training for nearly 150 years to do this work." Unquote. Alice Ann Bailey, The Externalization of the Hierarchy, page 677. Quote, "We," himself and Donald Keyes, "have worked together through several decades to sound the alarms and to point to possible new directions." Unquote. Norman Cousins' Introduction to Donald Keyes' Earth at Omega. The world was to be prepared for the new order, the new religion, and the new Messiah in many ways, mental as well as physical. Occult literature details this coming New World Order or New Order as a golden age. Conversely, the Bible describes it as a time of sorrow. Detailed preparation for that New World Order is very much in progress. This chapter will take a look at a few of the vehicles politically acculturating us for the New Order. We will examine the possibility of their work being influenced by occultism. Further, we shall see that much of, if not most of their work is either occultism or demands an occultic worldview for its acceptance. The Club of Rome's goals for mankind. Aurelio Pecci and Alexander King co-founded this influential network of financiers, industrialists, and scholars in the late 1960s. A capable executive, Pecci served as chief executive officer for the Olivetti Corporation and for Fiat Automobiles. His writings clearly reflect an occult worldview. They also reflected biases against Orthodox Christianity. The Club of Rome continues to work closely with a number of occult political action organizations, including Planetary Citizens, the International Center for Integrative Studies, ICIS, Lucis Trust, and the Global Education Associates. Indeed, its goals for mankind reports United Nations goals were submitted by Donald Keyes himself. Keyes is an activist with Lucis Trust and a former administrator of that organization. Extensive documentation is included in the appendix, including a 1979 membership list for the closed membership United States Association of the Club of Rome. Some original documents of the U.S. Association are also included. Many of the names on their membership list will be recognized as long-term active New Agers, i.e. Gene Houston, Willis Harman, and Hazel Henderson. Pecci evidently believed that Orthodox religious beliefs were somewhat primitive. Quote, "If the future was full of mystery, it was because it was shaped by the thought of the life beyond and the unquestioned belief that hell and heaven truly existed. The future belonged to God. Mortals would, according to the good or evil deeds of their lifetimes, either be rewarded by the Lord with unsurpassed bliss or punished for eternity. The soul was all that mattered. And so the human imagination created a host of spirits and deities to take control over mortal life." Pecci probably didn't know the closeness of his proposals to Bible prophecy, but judging from his associations, it is possible he did know he was reflecting the occultic inspired organic worldview. Quote, "One of the greatest socio-political and economic differences between the future and the present is that the increasingly intertwined structures of the entire global system will produce a progressive convergence of the futures of all peoples. All societies will be bound together ever more closely by a network of vital interlinkages, which will condition their relationships with each other for better or for worse. Breaking these links will no longer be conceivable. It would throw the whole system into chaos, which no one would want." Unquote. Pecci more than likely honestly thought this would usher in a time of peace and prosperity for life. But on close inspection, his proposals are more likely to usher Orwell's 1984 horrors than an age of peace, light, and love. If these links of which he speaks are truly unbreakable, individual freedoms are very much a thing of the past. Pecci's analysis also helps justify the establishment of the new universal religion. Quote, "The institutionalization of faith has not always had happy results. Certain points of doctrine have been magnified, provoking schisms, apostasy, and the denunciation of what are claimed to be heresies. The official truth has become impossible to question, and in order that it never should be questioned, ignorance and even superstitions have occasionally been encouraged. These structural inflexibilities and doctrinal introversions have helped to keep the major religions static, even when the winds of change blowing through society have made clear the need to move from one cultural epoch to another. As a result, it is difficult even for the most sensitive and profound theologians and scholars to break out of a system frozen into formulations, reflecting the past, a system that cannot adapt itself or its doctrines to modern life. Religions now run the risk of becoming a timid rearguard, detached from the problems and aspirations of a bewildered and troubled humanity. And yet humanity has a profound need for spirituality. The anguish within the churches, the call for a new ecumenism to free them from their narrow confines, the widespread interest in minor cults, and a return to a respect for nature, an ecological respect this time, are all symptoms of this need. They are encouraging symptoms, for without a sincere spiritual awakening, the renaissance of our true humanity will be impossible." Unquote. Animism and a repudiation of God's command for man to take dominion over the planet are occult belief hallmarks. Pecci also suggests that perhaps man created God and not vice versa. Quote, "We may also ask whether it was perhaps to justify our immense aspirations in our own eyes that we were led to conceive God, and thus to attain the privilege alone among all forms of life, of entering into communion with Him, and even to go so far as to assert that the Almighty had chosen to create us in His own image. Is not this anthropomorphism of the Creator, which is not exclusive to the Christian faith, in reality a form of deification of man?" Unquote. While ultimate motives are impossible for anybody but God to ascertain, it seems ironic that Pecci and his fellow planners had no qualms about playing God themselves. What Pecci was personally expressing a belief in was an organic view of the universe. Again, this is a belief that we are all part of a whole. On page 588 of The Externalization of the Hierarchy, Alice Bailey said this was an essential teaching to prepare men's minds to accept their occult Christ and his hierarchy. James Webb found this type of worldview universal among the occultists he studied. It may be mirrored in the popularization of unity consciousness among today's New Agers, where they come to a realization that they are one with everything in the universe, up to and including God. The Club of Rome betrays its occultic orientation in its recommended goals for human beliefs. Number 1, a world consciousness must be developed through which every individual realizes his role as a member of the world community. Number 2, a new ethic in the use of material resources must be developed, which will result in a style of life compatible with the coming age of scarcity. 3, an attitude towards nature must be developed based on harmony rather than conquest. Only in this way can man apply in practice what is already accepted in theory. This is that man is an integral part of nature. Number 4, if the human species is to survive, man must develop a sense of the identification with future generations and be ready to trade benefits to the next generation for the benefits to himself. If each generation aims at the maximum good for itself, Homo sapiens are as good as doomed. While all 4 items are integral parts of the occult worldview, goal number 4 in particular opens the door for a belief in reincarnation, and it is an argument often advanced for reincarnation, that it is ecologically healthier. In his Bantam New Age series book, The Case for Reincarnation, Joe Fisher writes, "Yet consider the transformation of earthly existence, were reincarnation accepted into the soul stream of the global population as a guide by which to live, acutely aware of reaping harvests of past deeds, while simultaneously sowing the seeds of the future lives, most people would behave very differently. Life on the planet would be overhauled, and hugely for the better. Wars, crime, racism, nationalism, and sexual chauvinism would be radically diminished." Really? Pause. In Hinduism, they believe in reincarnation, and they have all that stuff. Unpause. The nagging fear of death would be eliminated and replaced with acceptance of the opportunity for transformation. Doctors who strive to prolong life would see themselves as sad clowns flaunting their ignorance of cosmic renewal. Genetic engineering would be recognized by all as meddlesome and dangerous. Care would be taken not to encourage the extinction of animal and plant species, lest rungs be removed from the evolutionary ladder. Acceptance of reincarnation demands a complete overturning of prevailing attitudes inculcated by a civilization as long over-identified with the body. To understand the Club of Rome materials and put them in proper perspective, one must keep the Book of Revelation and the Book of Daniel by his side. Mr. Wally Woods of Houston, Texas, wrote an excellent report on the Club of Rome. He has given me permission to reprint it, and it is included in the appendix to this book. Maybe I'll read that. Unpause. If they were operating from a bias-free perspective, that would be one matter. However, the statements in their reports and the affiliations of their officers and members with occult interest groups, including Lucis Trust, clearly indicate that they are not bias-free. Therefore, their objectivity must remain suspect. It is no small coincidence that both their political and spiritual solutions parallel those of Alice Bailey's Tibetan master, especially in the light of Donald Key's inputs into their projects. The International Center for Integrative Studies, Integrative Studies. Another group working closely with the Club of Rome is the International Center for Integrative Studies. It probably is not coincidental that their acronym is pronounced ISIS. ICIS was organized in 1962. Since the Club of Rome's formation in the 1967 and 1962, ICIS has worked closely with it. ISIS gives the following reasons for its information. Pause. When she said it's not a coincidence that their acronym is pronounced ISIS, that has nothing to do with the Eroteism group. It's with the goddess, right? Because that wasn't a thing yet. Anyway, unpause. The International Center for Integrative Studies, ICIS, was founded in 1962 by a distinguished group of scientists, scholars, and corporate leaders who believed that the growing and even perilous web of political, technological, and human issues that confront us all can only be managed when we recognize and understand their global impact. Giants in their field like Arnold Toynbee, Bertrand Russell, Petiram Sorokin, and Abraham H. Maslow believed a worldwide vision for the future was essential to influencing the quality of life in the 21st century. ISIS too believes, as does the Club of Rome, that a global vision is necessary. Towards that end, they have collaborated with the Club of Rome and other globalist organizations, including Lucis Trust, in the shaping of such an agenda. Similar to Planetary Initiative's World Council of Wise Persons, ISIS too is convening the world's best minds. Their membership solicitation says, quote, "For the first time ever, ISIS is convening an assembly of the members of the International Council, some of the best minds now at work in the world to design an agenda for the 21st centuries grounded upon positive human values. In addition to the global media exposure it will attract, this assembly will generate strategies and fresh approaches to the tough issues of today and tomorrow. Human creativity and values that sustain and enrich the human spirit, management of change, ecology, hunger, and disarmament. Participants will be linked together after the assembly via a continuing computer network conference, and membership will expand to include other key thought leaders in the world." Unquote. Donald Keyes once served as ISIS president, showing further the interlocking nature of many of these global-oriented organizations. Again, the occult worldview is reflected in their materials. Their membership book offerings for 1984 included New Genesis by Robert Mueller, 2010 Odyssey 2 by Arthur C. Clarke, The Confirmation of Otherness by Maurice Friedman, The Innovators by James Botkin, Dan Domeniescu, and Ray Stata, maybe. Like Donald Keyes, United Nations Assistant Secretary General Robert Mueller is a Lucis Trust cooperator. He gave a December 28, 1984 speech to Lucis Trust with the somewhat unassuming title of The New Group of World Servers, A Look into the Future. His book, New Genesis, offered by ISIS, contained a chapter entitled The Reappearance of Christ. A footnote indicated this is a transcript of a speech he gave to an Arcane School conference, again a major division of Lucis Trust. Yes, the Arcane School is part of the Lucis Trust Alice Bailey business. ISIS' other book offerings are also New Consciousness, New World Order oriented, to do with the New Consciousness, New Order combination. Those on their international council are generally active in the New Age movement in organizations ranging from planetary citizens through the Temple of Understanding. Their 1984 International Council included the following. I'm going to scroll over this. It's a long list of names. Maurice Bajart, Choreography, Belgium. And Ellen Burstyn, actress from the United States. Joseph Campbell, Intercultural Mythology. I'm just noticing some that I'm familiar with. Arthur C. Clarke. I don't know most of these people. But a lot of people from all over the world. Japan, Sweden, USA, Brazil, India, Peru, etc. Friend of ISIS, enemy of God. ISIS gave prospective members a quiz. Their solicitation asked, which of these statements best reflects your own thinking? They gave the following quotations, respectively, by Arthur C. Clarke, Albert Camus, and John Naisbitt, and Gunnar Myrdal. Number 1, the technologies that could destroy us can also be used for our salvation. To understand is first of all to unify. Number 3, we must learn to balance the material wonders of technology with the spiritual demands of our human nature. Number 4, while man's power over nature is increasing fast, man's control over society is lagging far behind. The solicitation said, if you answered yes to any of the above, you are already a friend of ISIS. And conversely, if you answered yes to any of these, you are in danger of becoming an enemy of God. Sometimes convenience comes from technology, but never salvation. That comes solely through Jesus Christ. As regards the second statement, unity consciousness, or the act of unifying, underlies all of occultism. It also is the basis for all initiatory experiences. What is expressed here is a false syncretistic unity where instead of true unity in Jesus Christ. Naisbitt has made it publicly clear also that he defines spiritual as an attunement or initiatory experience. Pause. This makes me really very much reflect on a lot of the videos I've made that show a lot of experiences that are happening in churches like Bethel Church and the Toronto Blessing and all those things. I believe those are all initiatory experiences to get people attuned to a spirit. Unpause. He is not presently using the term spiritual in the sense of Sunday school lessons. The fourth question is a little more subtle, but the dangers of trying to gain control over society should be self-evident. Those who feel we should do so would probably be receptive to a dictatorship. So, it's 2024. Just saying. Would be probably receptive to a dictatorship such as that the Antichrist will ultimately impose. The orientation of the bulk of ISIS leadership. ISIS has been openly friendly to Eastern religions and apostate Christianity and equally hostile to religious orthodoxies. Therefore, it is not difficult to see that religious fundamentalists would not enjoy a particularly happy future under a society controlled by the friends of ISIS. George Christie is an executive of ISIS. He is also a member of Lucis Trust. He is retired from his position of founding Director General of the Intelsat Consortium of 106 countries. During his brilliant career, he also was Director of International Development for the Communications Satellite Corporation. Now in semi-retirement, he keeps busy at ISIS's Vice President and Treasurer. His days are spent at their youth center, The Door, in New York City. Clearly, he is, as the New Agers say, initiate. In a 1984 World Servers Forum at Lucis Trust, Communications in the Service of Humanity quoted former Maitreyan candidate Krishnamurti. He also betrayed the elitism that so frequently creeps into occult thinking. This is a belief common since the time of Plato, that only those who have had an initiatory experience and share the occult worldview are competent to govern. Quote, a tiny trace of a foreign substance in pure silicon changes that very common element to a junction transistor capable of producing the magic of new technology. Equally so, a relatively small number of people who satisfy what I call the four perimeters of spiritual expression to be in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing with the right people. A small number can literally allow transformation to take place, which will then get at the causes of hunger, the causes of war, and the sources that allow violence to leak into the human situation. Unquote. George Christie was also excited about the growing occult influences over mass media. Of that he said, quote, the Father's house is wired, and we can infuse that network with a living, vital, positive energy that will transform the planet. We are midwives of a birthing process to the new age, unquote. The birthing process. That's a lot. That's something that does come up a lot in the NAR, all this birthing. And sometimes people are even pretending or acting like that's what they're doing. Unpause, sorry. ISIS too believes in thinking globally, acting locally. So one of their projects includes a special youth project, which they call The Door, located in New York City. It features extensive programs for those between the ages of 12 and 20. The Door receives many governmental and foundation grants. The motives of the staff may be admirable. Undoubtedly benefits accrue to the young people who go there. Nevertheless, it clearly violates legal principles against merging church and state, according to George's answers to a Lucis Trust questioner. Unidentified man from audience. I realize that a lot of your work probably focuses on very pragmatic, real, everyday problems. Does your organization in any way delve into or counsel to explore the metaphysical circumstances that these young people are in? Are they perhaps exploring that they have perhaps a soul, that they might be in a continuing evolutionary process in this his life? Or is it really just very pragmatic? George Christie. Well, I'm going to be pretentious again. Everybody that's close into the center, into the International Center for Integrative Studies, does that 24 hours a day to the best of his or her ability. And we fall on our face very frequently, but we work at it. Does that answer your question? Now, we don't publish it. It's not in our literature. You're not going to find it there. It's right out there. You're not going to find it. Same man. No, but what I'm saying, are there any metaphysical people on your council, on that professional staff? George Christie, every single one. Every single one. Well, I don't know how metaphysical I am. I don't know. The same man, after extensive laughter from audience. No, I realize that all is metaphysics. However, in other words, if a kid comes in there and he's really struggling, George Christie, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Conscious spiritual endeavor, absolutely a requirement for the staff of the door. If you are going to tell young people how to change their lives, then they themselves have to actualize their own life. We won't keep them around unless they do. Same man. No, I understand what you were saying, but a psychologist can do the same thing without ever discussing the possible nature of the soul, of another life, of other existences, of carrying over behavior patterns. These are references to reincarnation, etc. Not just from parents and environment. I'm not saying you should do this. I'm asking if this is being done. George Christie. I think we should do it, and do it like hell. We should work at it. I don't see how you can change unless you deal with those problems and those patterns. I say that the only thing I can say about the group that I'm associated with is that we consciously work at it, and we use all the tools available to any of you to do it. Now, how well we do it, I'm not so sure. Sometimes we do pretty well, sometimes we don't. It depends on the day of the week, but we never publish it. Evidently, George didn't know that his Lucius Trust taped statement was publication. Christie also spoke of their networking with the Club of Rome. Quote, we're 20 years old. We were 20 years old last year. We publish an international journal. We have a closed network of 250 to 300 of the finest change agent scholars in the world who belong to this network. We are very active with the Club of Rome. In fact, No Limits to Learning was written in our library, which was one of the Club of Rome reports. George Christie, a mover and shaker in many circles, makes it clear that his orientation is that of the plan. The same is probably true of most of the networkers we have mentioned. Now, when you speak of the plan, capital P, I, of course, probably think the same thing as most of you do here. Unquote. Global 2000 report to the President. Many probably would not think as a presidential commission as a New Age center. But yet, the movement's imprint was seen on President Carter's Global 2000 Commission. Gerald O. Barney, a member of the Club of Rome that commissioned presidential study. Not surprisingly, Club of Rome's previous work was reflected in its recommendations. Not coincidentally, the Global 2000 report to President Carter echoed the conclusions of the Club of Rome. The New Agers were ecstatic. The Global Tomorrow Coalition, a response to Global 2000. Following closely on the heels of Global 2000, the Global Tomorrow Coalition is one of the more sophisticated New Age political networking efforts to date. It is headed by former Republican Governor Russell W. Peterson. Peterson is also the chairman of the participating Audubon Society. Its 60-member groups range from the Alan Guttmacher Institute to John Denver's WinStar Foundation. It also includes Friends of the Earth, the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and the World Federalist Association. As was the case with the Club of Rome and Global 2000, their concerns also were long-range global issues. They dealt with nearly every aspect of public policy, including population, resources, environment, sustainable development, conservation, wildlife protection, species diversity, deforestation, food production and distribution, health, and public education. Food production and distribution, health, and public education. Sorry about that. Existing evidently to give support for the implementation of Global 2000's recommendations, the Global Tomorrow Coalition holds meetings in Washington and at the community level across the country. One such meeting, held in June 1983 in Washington, D.C., featured former President Jimmy Carter as the keynote speaker. Other speakers included World Watch Institute's Lester Brown, president of the New Age-oriented World Watch Institute, Congressman Richard Ottinger, Swedish Ambassador Inga Thorsson, Russell Train of the World Wildlife Fund, and Year 2000 Committee Reagan aide Danny Boggs, Senior Policy Advisor and Special Assistant to President Reagan, Congressional aide John Gibbons, and cable television magnate Ted Turner. Ex-presidents usually charge large sums as lecture fees. In this case, the Global Tomorrow Coalition was able to afford it because the June 1983 meeting received financial support. It came from the Belden Fund, the George Gund Foundation. Gund is a member of the U.S. Association for the Club of Rome, the HKH Foundation, the Huber Foundation, and the Stonebridge Foundation. The Brandt Commission and the North-South Report. When the North-South Commission met in Cancun, Mexico in the fall of 1982, it was a command performance for most world governments. President Reagan, British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and many others personally attended. Again, one would not look for a New Age center in such a setting, but the Brandt Commission was very much one. Willy Brandt continues to be a favorite lecturer on New Age circuits. The Brandt Commission's networking ranged from the Club of Rome to Benjamin Crem's own Share International. Share International, in turn, is directly connected with the so-called reappearance of the Christ. Thumbing through occult magazines freely distributed about the country detailing the New Age activities of that geographical city, I have seen Willy Brandt's name more than once as a featured speaker at a New Age event. One of the staff members is evidently more than peripherally involved in New Age networking. The following item appeared in a December 1983 letter to ESP, Energy System Parameters, members. Quote, the director of Brandt Commission Research, his group serves as a link for information analysis between Germany, Canada, the United States, and South America. Currently based in Ohio, James made his computer and office staff available for the typing of The Community as Disciple, Volume 1. With so many organizations and so many prominent people publicizing the need for a new world order and an organic worldview, their implementation appear inevitable. Indeed, the Bible prophesied that it would come. Rather than a time for panic, it is a time for soberly considering the times in which we live, for speaking the truth in love to those so involved, and making our own peace with the Lord. Amen. The new order will not occur one day before God is ready, but it will occur. The Bible prophesied it. And, as Jesus told Peter, these things must be fulfilled as written. So they must be today. The best advice is that of Jesus. When you see these things come upon the earth, lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. It will not be a pleasant time, but even so, come Lord Jesus. And that is the end of chapter 16. That is the last chapter of this book, The Planned Deception. And I think that was very good advice. Here are the chapter notes. And I might read one of these appendixes. Or two. I'm not sure. But for now, that concludes the book, A Planned Deception. Thank you for watching or listening.
Run.
There's just one name that can keep you out of hell, and it's the name of Jesus. The name of Jesus. The name of Jesus.